Hello, welcome to Radical Self Forgiveness. This is class 2, and I'm your instructor, Rebecca Harmon. My email is again listed on this first slide, Rebecca, RSCP, at gmail.com. And I'm glad to see you back for class number 2. Let's go ahead and get started. Once again, just a quick review. The textbook we are using for this class is Radical Self Forgiveness, written by Colin Tipping. There are handouts which give you the slides that I'm using here in the lecture, and they can be found if you look below the video on your YouTube page here. You can see it'll say Class 2 handouts. Click that link. It'll take you to a website where you can download the PDF file that has all of these slides. And the beauty of having that handout is that you get the hyperlinks to the videos and other things that are mentioned in this lecture. So go ahead and pause this video and go grab the handout for class 2, and we'll be ready to go. Once again, I'm recording this lecture separate from the live class that I'm holding so that you have access to it no matter where you live or no matter what time zone you're in, and also so that the students that I'm leading in the live workshop have the advantage of privacy and don't have their names and faces and discussions recorded and posted on the internet. Once again, I'm a licensed spiritual practitioner with CSL Greater Pittsburgh, and I am offering this class on a love offering basis. And if you feel moved to share any kind of remuneration or money for this class, CSL Greater Pittsburgh would be happy to accept it. And there are 2 ways to do so listed here at the bottom of this slide. Let's get started on our class 2. So in a traditional live class, this would be the time when I would ask people if they had any questions from last week on the handouts, on the textbook, or just in general. And I would simply take this time to encourage you not to feel like you're bothering me. I want you to reach out and ask me questions. I want you to challenge perhaps some of the things that you're reading about in the textbook. I'm here to have that dialogue with you, even though you're watching this video and you're not participating in a live class. I want to encourage you to reach out to me with any of your questions. I'll be happy to answer them. So the next thing that we're going to do is a guided meditation. And you can see here, once again, I have the word video. It's hyperlinked. And so if you have not downloaded the handout for class 2, I'm going to ask you to pause this video and look underneath the video for the link to class 2 handout. Go ahead and download the handout. Click on that link and allow yourself to experience the guided meditation that is available at that video link. So pause me, get yourself set up and ready for the guided meditation. Similar to the guided meditation or similar to the video in the first class that we experienced together, I'm going to recommend that you view this guided meditation video when you're able to be in a place where there's not distractions and that there's quiet and that you can be undisturbed. I think it's a 12 to 15-minute video. So it should put you in a very nice state of being. And so I will say goodbye for now as you pause me and access the guided meditation. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, I hope that the guided meditation put you into a nice place in terms of being ready to receive more information and think about more things surrounding this journey into self-forgiveness. We're going to jump into chapter 3 and explore this concept of our lost selves. So what are lost selves? Remember the diagram that I shared in the last class where we had the disowned selves and the lost selves kind of out at the edge of our multitude of selves graphic. So lost selves are these parts of us that we've either turned our backs on, walked away from, or many times we've traded them in for something else. And I'll explain that in a minute. Sometimes this happens in childhood. Other times it happens in adolescence, in college, even in adulthood. These can be parts of ourselves that we gave up willingly. And sometimes we do this because it's kind of this contract we make as we are creating a socially modified version of ourselves. And the author talked about that a little bit in chapter 2. But these lost selves take on a variety of forms. So here's some examples that I think come from the book. These are good examples. And you could probably think of a few yourself. But let's look at these three. This is someone talking about their lost self. I'd really love to make art and sell it, but I have a family to support. So I took a corporate job to make sure I can pay the bills and keep a roof over our heads. I now have very little time to be creative. Here's another one. I am normally a very outgoing and friendly person, hugging people I meet and being very chatty with everyone. I gave that up because it made my partner feel insecure and jealous. I gave up my dream of whatever, insert something there, because it just never seemed to take off. I kept hitting my head against the wall and running into dead end after dead end. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, is this even what I'm supposed to be doing? I'd like you to hit pause and just take a few minutes to think about yourself and your experience, your life, and identify a lost self. I want you to just think about it. You don't have to write about it. I just want you to pause for a minute and think about your life, your journey, and what lost selves you may have left alongside the road along the way. Okay, we're going to go on and do an exercise about our lost selves. And again, I hope you were able to pause the video for just a minute and think. Just think quietly for a few minutes about your own experience. So exercise 5, and these exercises all come from the book. So you can revisit them with the video or you can revisit them as you're reading the book. So we're going to do exercise 5 and we're going to reflect on the parts of our lives that we may have lost by giving them up or shutting them down or trading them away for any number of reasons. And this is going to be a journaling exercise. So you're going to write your thoughts about each one of those lost selves. So you're going to do a little bit of journaling. And here are some aspects of self that we may have let go of. And let me give you a couple examples that weren't in the previous one. Sometimes we may have let's look at integrity. Some people feel that they have sacrificed their integrity for a certain career option. So maybe they have a deep and abiding interest in climate change and environmentalism, but they, young in their life, they went into a career that really isn't focused on respecting the climate. And they may feel that to maintain their career and to continue to support their family, that they may feel that they've traded their integrity for that. Let's see another one. Let's look at peace. Sometimes you'll see people who will stay in a relationship that's not very good. They'll trade away their own personal peace because they feel that staying in the relationship checks off other boxes that might be socially acceptable or maybe necessary for survival or whatnot. And I think of, for example, a woman who's in an abusive relationship. She may believe that trading her peace is in the best interest of the family, or because maybe she doesn't have a way to care for her children if she leaves. And so that's an extreme example, certainly. One that's a little less extreme, we could look at someone who traded their life dream. And I think there was a statement in the previous slide that referred to that. Your life dream may be something that you believe can't earn you a family supporting wage. And so you put that on hold while you pursue something, more logical. So go ahead and put this on pause this video and spend some time reflecting on the different areas in your life that you may have lost and write about this in your journal. And when you're done, come back and we'll continue. Okay, after that exercise, you're going to finish your journal entries with the following sentence. I want you to finish this sentence. If I had the chance to do it all over again, the one thing I would not trade away would be, finish that sentence. And if you need to, you can pause the video again and think about what you're going to write in there and come back when you're ready. Okay, chapter 3, we start to get into this idea of our disowned selves. Now, at the end of chapter 2 and in the first part of this class session, we were looking at our lost selves. Now we're going to look at a slightly different self that is cast off, but instead of being lost, these are disowned selves. So, what are disowned selves? These are parts of ourselves that we have rejected as being unacceptable. This often happens in childhood, but it's not exclusively an artifact of childhood. And what happens is that these are attributes of ourselves that we've quickly learned aren't socially acceptable. In other words, they're just not things that we can continue to express and expect to be welcomed and loved really by others. So here's a couple examples. Young child in a traditional patriarchal family who has dreams and goals and desires that don't align with the parents' ideas of what a boy or a girl should do or become. So, for example, a boy who wants to dance ballet might, in some families, be something that's just totally not acceptable. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, absolutely, but I'm talking about within a traditional, um, very patriarchal family. By the same token, a girl who wanted to fix cars and go hunting may be looked at as, not fitting in the mold that the parents and the grandparents and the family had for her when she was born. This can Those are examples, of course, from childhood, and I think we all have some aspects of this, or we know someone who's dealing with some aspect of this. This can also happen, however, when we move into new areas as adults or as children in school. Certainly, approval and acceptance are really powerful mechanisms of control. And if you've ever been a new child in a school situation, you know this. I would even say I've experienced certain mild aspects of this being the new person in an organization, in a job. And so to fit in, and we could even couch this as to survive, we could look at it as surviving, depending on what that context is. We learn what to express openly and what to keep to ourselves. So we've probably all experienced this at some time or another as an adult. And so these selves are part of ourselves that we choose to suppress, tamp down, put in put in the trunk and lock the lid. So we're not going to do another exercise on this in the class, but as your homework assignment at the end of this lecture, I'm going to remind you to do exercise 6 on page 60, which will help you do some more deep work on identifying the disowned selves that you have. And now we're going to take a deep dive and look at another self that we all carry around with us in chapter 3, the saboteur self. The saboteur is the person that shoots us in the foot. It's the part of us that just when we've got everything going for us, we go and we shoot ourselves in the foot, or we mess everything up for ourselves. And so, for example, here's one: if we've experienced a difficult relationship, or maybe several difficult relationships, we may get this idea that we're not relationship material, and this speaks to our saboteur self. And that saboteur self will then set up barriers to any future potential relationships, and we will find ourselves excusing or just setting up these barriers and challenges to ever getting into a relationship again. This is a huge factor with people that struggle with money and abundance. Huge issue. That saboteur self is always showing up when you've got someone with major issues around money and abundance. And if we grew up in a family, or if we have a deep rooted belief that money is a negative force, and there are a lot of religious traditions that teach that money is bad, if we hold that as a truth, if we believe deeply that money causes more problems than it solves, if we were raised to believe that there's never enough, that is what we're going to experience. Our saboteur self is that self fulfilling kind of thing. If we harbor a lot of negative ideas about anything, But in this example, of course, I'm talking about money or wealth or abundance. Our saboteur self works behind the scenes to make sure that that belief that we have is indeed what shows up for us. It is rooted in our subconscious, the saboteur, these beliefs, these attitudes, these are buried deep, deep within our subconscious minds. And so it's operating automatically and it's running behind the scenes. A lot of people call the subconscious mind that tape that runs, just runs on an automatic loop. So the subconscious mind, these belief systems, these attitudes, these deep core knowings, if you will, they operate without reminding us. They're just running just under the surface. But if we're doing self work, if we're working on things to try to be better, we can start to notice patterns. We can start to catch ourselves as we say things. We can spot that saboteur self at work. And so the next homework assignment that I'm going to ask you to do is exercise 7, identifying the saboteur self. And that is on pages 67 to 68. And it is a really good exercise to help do some inner work to identify the inner saboteur who is throwing up so many roadblocks and challenges. And that concludes chapter 3. And we're going to go ahead and move into chapter 4. Now, chapter 4, guilt and shame, is a big chapter. So we're going to get it started in this class, but we're going to finish it in the next class. So let's get started. Get started with some definitions. The definition in the book for guilt is a feeling of remorse over something that we have done but should not have done, or something that we did not do and should have done. Shame, on the other hand, is remorse about the kind of person that we think we are or think we should be. And there's a note here. Making the distinction between guilt and shame is a critical step for us to be able to do the radical self-forgiveness process. So we need to make sure we understand it's a little bit nuanced. We need to understand that difference between guilt and shame. So let's talk a little bit about guilt. The book talks about appropriate and inappropriate guilt. And appropriate retrospective guilt, or appropriate guilt looking at something in the past, is our way of accepting responsibility for our actions. We may have appropriate guilt over breaking a promise that we made to someone, or guilt over an agreement that we did not hold our end of up. We agreed to do something and we dropped the ball. We may harbor appropriate retrospective guilt over hurting someone. Maybe we were reckless, careless, thoughtless, and we hurt someone. And that would be an appropriate guilt to feel. Then there's another kind of guilt, inappropriate retrospective guilt. And this is when we feel blame for something we didn't consciously choose, we had no control over. 2 examples here: driving safely, but hitting a pedestrian who steps out from behind a blind spot while they're texting. So we're doing everything we're supposed to do. We're driving within the speed limit. We're not distracted, but someone who is not paying attention steps out in front of us. We might feel guilty, but it would be inappropriate retrospective guilt because we did not consciously choose or irresponsibly act. Another one another form of inappropriate guilt might be people who are kept on at a job because they have seniority while other people are downsized and let go. There's a lot of guilt, and that's similar to survivor's guilt. In that case, it's a job. You survived downsizing or a reduction in force, but it's still survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt was fairly prevalent after 9/11. And so there were people in New York City in the Twin Towers that got out and suffered because so many people did perish that day. There was a lot of survivor's guilt among those who did end up surviving those attacks. Survivor's guilt is also something that you see frequently with combat veterans. So I'm going to ask you to do an exercise here. I'm going to ask you to pause the video and take out a piece of paper or write in your journal. Or if you're doing your journaling online, open another Word file document and just spend some time and make a quick list of things that you feel guilty about right now. If you have any active guilt going on, or something that you can remember from your past that you felt guilty about. And then you're going to use a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being just a little bit of guilt and 10 being major guilt, and rank each thing that you've listed. And then after you've ranked each thing, go back and assign a percent of appropriateness to each, as well as inappropriateness. So, for example, if we look at the example of the person that's driving safely and following all, taking care to be a safe driver, and someone who is texting and walking steps out in front of them, that would be 100% inappropriate guilt. I mean, I think we could all understand why you'd feel guilty, but it would be 100% inappropriate. Let's say that you have a situation where you broke a promise to someone, and that promise hurt that person. That promise that you broke hurt that person very badly, and they had given you no reason to break that promise. It was totally on you to do. That might be 100% appropriate guilt. So just spend some time thinking about the situations, assigning a rank 1 to 10, and then considering the percent of appropriateness or inappropriateness that you would assign to each. And the book says that sometimes this exercise actually decreases the percent of guilt that we feel. You'll see. So go ahead and hit pause. And when you're done with this exercise, okay, so we're going to move from the study or the deep dive of guilt, and we're going to shift over into shame. And we will not finish the section on shame in this class. We will have to finish it in class 3, but we'll go ahead and get started because I think it's worth spending a couple sessions on shame. We know that when we feel shame, we feel worthless, undeserving. We feel terrible. We feel like we're no good. And the book reports, based on research, that self-loathing is a pretty common emotion, and that's really sad to me. Self-loathing ranges from being a very vague feeling of questioning our worth, all the way over to severe self-hatred. You may have heard the term imposter syndrome. It's something that describes, very often used to describe millennials who don't feel that that they're really measuring up to all they are being paid or recognized as being. It's imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a form of self-loathing. It happens when people don't feel that they deserve their place in life, or their salary, or their position. Shame is so toxic that I think that the medical and the health outcomes that are connected to shame are hugely underreported. And I can tell you, as I look back over family, friends, and distant relatives over the years, whose stories, you grew up hearing, and whose medical and health journeys you grow up hearing as well, I can tell you that unresolved shame is almost always connected to some deep chronic illness. Louise Hay's work around Heal Your Body, connecting diseases with certain deep emotions, is very useful in understanding shame and its impact on our bodies. If you haven't read her work, you might want to make a note to dig into that at some point. If we're going to work on healing shame, it requires that we transform beliefs that we have that are toxic, that are poisonous about ourselves, and neutralize those so that we can remove them from our experience and free ourselves from the effects of those toxins. The author writes about 5 steps that we can use to transform the core negative beliefs that are inherent to shame and turn the corner to a healthier way of being. And these 5 steps are discovering the shame, the root of it, recognizing it, evaluating it, and then neutralizing it, and then finally transforming it. We'll dig into this a little bit deeper in our next class, but I wanted to introduce those 5 steps. The next exercise that I want you to do, I want you to pause this video and I want you to open your handout for class 2 and click on the link here, Guilt and Shame, and watch the interview that was done with Brene Brown on guilt and shame. It's an excellent short treatise on guilt and shame. And I think it beautifully sums up these 2 issues in a way that only Brene Brown can do. So go ahead and hit pause. Check out this short video on guilt and shame. And when you're done, come back. All right. I hope you enjoyed that Brene Brown video clip. I thought it was a very appropriate way to close out the second class. So for our homework this week, I want you to read, of course, chapters 3 and 4. And I already mentioned this, but go ahead and do exercise 6 and exercise 7 in chapter 3. And the pages are listed there. You're going to work with your disowned selves and your saboteur self. In chapter 4, please complete exercise 9, identifying your shame-based core negative beliefs. Also, please do exercise 10 on page 105, your true false core negative beliefs. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we are absolutely going to continue our work on the issue of shame in our next class. So I hope to see you in our next class. And again, please do reach out to me if you have questions, if you have comments, if you're having any difficulty with any of the technology, the videos or anything you need help with, or any questions that you have, please reach out. I look forward to seeing you in our next class session. Until then, take care.